It's easy to confuse Bubble City.
Oh, I've done that.
That's a good sign. Means you're getting
I've
around.
done that war site in zones, and I've said I was in the wrong place, like in Chechnya, and I was in Ingushetia.
2,
Really?
1.
This is iCastNews.com, live and direct from the United Nations headquarters in New York City. And this is Heat in the Middle East. Joining me for today's episode of Heat in the Middle East is the senior correspondent for Press TV, Hank Flynn. Hank, how are you doing this week?
Not bad. It's a busy week. Thank you for having me, Jonathan.
It's a busy week all across the Middle East.
Sure.
All kinds of things going on. The big thing we don't know about is what's going on with the hostages and the situation at that gas plant 1,000 miles from Algiers in Algeria, eastern Algeria, where hostages have been taken, where there have been at least one raid going on. Scary stuff, don't you think?
Well, yeah. I mean, the numbers are all over the place, aren't they? One report to the next. This many killed, that many. If you ask the Algerian Special Forces, not too many hostages killed, a whole lot of terrorists killed. Other people say other things, but the thing that seems constant to me is complaints from the U.S. and UK State Department about, hey, we weren't consulted when your special forces went in to go retake a gas plant in your country. Maybe I'm not sophisticated enough, but to me there's a certain element of the golden rule here. I don't know when the last time the U.S. contacted Lahore or Islamabad before we sent drone attacks over their particular country.
How about when we sent SEAL 6 team attack into Abbottabad?
How about that? You know, when did Algiers need to contact the UK or the US in order to retake a piece of territory that's in the middle of their country? You have to really get back to zeros on this. Who's profiting from this gas plant? Why are so many different American and UK officials there? It's for energy, as it always is, but we discussed this before. That part of Africa is nothing but a bed of natural resources, and the Western world wants it badly.
Well, and especially Europe.
Yeah.
Just across the Mediterranean, an easy throw. Natural gas is a clean resource.
There's no doubt about it, and you know, from what my research is leading me, that's what Mali is all about as well. Gold, uranium, you know, and the French haven't hesitated one bit. It's funny because you talk, especially here at the UN where we are now, there's a lot of care given to who's going where and why, whose drones are overflying what territories, whose boots are on whose ground. But other than a Security Council resolution a little more than last week ago that gave the okay, a Chapter 7 okay, a military okay to a UN military force, and that was not to be utilized until the Malians had been trained, and it was supposed to be an African or an Afrocentric UN force rather. A lot of the troops supposedly coming in from Nigeria. There was nothing about French airplanes flying over, dropping munitions. There were nothing about French boots on the ground, and yet France has not spared a moment to get involved in a very personal way in what used to be its very own colony. Maybe that explains the ease with which it jumped in.
Well, I think it's its own colony, and I think they look across the Mediterranean and they see a land. How is Algeria described? Vast emptiness of great riches, and they see a place that's just fallen apart in Mali, and they're worried about a base to attack them, to attack their cities. Of course, there are a lot of Algerians who live in southern France, so their exposure to terrorism is pretty high.
Well, and these are talking points that they've jumped on, that they've pushed, and that have been bought hook, line, and sinker by the British and the Germans and everyone else that lives around France. I mean, it's not a difficult sell. Not to wax generally, but fear always sells. You know, if you can always get people up on their toes and ready to take some kind of action if you get them good and honestly scared. You know, and if the French are genuinely scared, if the French State Department is scared, we've answered our own question.
Well, I think the French people are scared. I think terrorism, what has happened in Great Britain with terrorists happening in France, is a very spooky kind of thing for the French. Do you have any idea how this is playing in Tehran? When you talk to your friends in the back channel at Press TV Center, are they alarmed by the Europeans going into North Africa, thinking that it says to people, you know, it's okay to use weapons against countries you don't like or you're afraid of?
Well, the Iranians are very independent people. And so I wouldn't pretend to speak for the Iranians on this issue, but my best guess would be, generally speaking, going along their track record politically, they don't like to see overt Western involvement in other countries. And that's been the rule, not the exception of this heat in the Middle East that we talk about. That's been the rule for generations, for decades, and it's something that the Iranians here in the Western world are often demonized for, when the reality is they just sort of want to run their own show, and they want for other nations to be able to run their own shows as well. And the Iranians don't mind helping other countries, spreading their influence a little bit, as any more powerful country would. But by the same token, the Iranians don't want heavy Western involvement all over the Middle Eastern world, because the West has shown no hesitance to demonize Iran on the subject of nuclear weapons, human rights, right or wrong.
Do you think there's any subject that they're not demonized on other than Persian carpets?
Well, the Persian carpets are very nice.
Yes, they are. They are very nice. I mean, this week we saw the reports out of Vienna about the UN experts returning from Tehran with no permission to go in and examine some plants, and we're hearing more rumblings.
The Iranians are strict adherents to the Non-Proliferation Treaty, and it's what they go to every time, and they go to it again and again, because this is something that was signed by most of the major players. The IAEA has proven itself to be compromised. That last IAEA report, the one that came in about a year ago, was fraught with bad information, old information, information that's been refuted about fuses, about things that are supposed to be detonators, things that were taken off of a DVD that was stolen from an Iranian professor half a decade ago.
You know better than to believe professors.
Listen,
we know that.
Ex-IAEA directors, State Department officials, U.S. intelligence officials have gone on the record to scotch that report. But it's not anything that you'd read easily in Western media, because it doesn't follow the agenda. This report was garbage, and the Iranians have said so, but people dismiss what the Iranians have to say because it sounds like self-defense. But it really was. There wasn't anything new in that report. The trouble is that many Western states want to see the Iranians open and yet they're the first ones in the General Assembly to hold up a chart and say this is how close Iran is to gaining a nuclear weapon. And again, the Supreme Leader has issued a fatwa that Iran can not only not construct a nuclear weapon, it can't handle them nor possess them. And the Iranians, top to bottom, every Iranian source that I have that I've talked to basically calls nuclear weapons a liability and not an asset.
It struck me, the timing of this news. The report out of Vienna comes on the eve of a general election in Israel. And it would almost seem, I'm not there to listen to the press right now, and I think they do have because they have the Sabbath, they have a kind of before the election, the voting begins, they have kind of a pause. But boy, this gives the right wing something to talk about. I mean, it's very popular among certain parties there to beat the drums to let's go bomb Iran.
It's you know, it's one of those things that I'm really just going to get a bag of popcorn and sit and watch Israeli politics, because I'm not qualified to comment on it. A good friend of mine who works in the press corps tells me that as soon as an Israeli politician loses an election, he simply goes out and forms a new party. You know,
well, that is part of their problem. They've got these. It's like salami tactics, and the parties get smaller and smaller and smaller. And Netanyahu's party has made alliances with more parties to the right of it, and unfortunately, the Arab Palestinians aren't voting. If they were, there's so many small parties now that if the Arabs were to turn out in large number, they in fact could be the second largest grouping in the Knesset of 120 seats, but they're so hopeless. They don't have a lot of hope. That one of the key things to watch is what kind of turnout they will have. I don't expect it to be great turnout. I think Netanyahu will get reelected, and then the question is, who are his partners going to be? And maybe since he's not running, he could actually sit back and be realistic for a change instead of being the bombastic, I'm holding up my bomb thing. You got to admit, it was a great graphic. I mean, I'm not
Nobody brings charts to the GA. The fact that he even brought one.
Primitive chart.
Sure. The next thing somebody does in the GA will be a PowerPoint demonstration, and that'll be fantastic.
Oh, that'll be as boring as most of the meetings at the UN. Let's talk about something I saw today on a Press TV website. There was talk repeating what we've heard out of the UN refugee organizations, that there are maybe 700,000 refugees coming out of Mali because of the conflict going on there. That's a huge problem. They don't have money for it. But I'm more concerned with Syria because the UN desperately needs about $1 billion. It's not getting pledges of the money. Just today, the Jordanians said that they can't take any more refugees out of Syria. The killing's going on. We're starting to see what the Russians warned us about, that not all the guys in the opposition are good guys. In Aleppo, they're beginning to slaughter people. Now, whether you agree or not with the politics, it's still refugees. Where are the refugees going to go, and who's going to feed them?
Well, they're going to go wherever they can go. Honestly, a refugee is going to go to wherever it is he can lie down, hopefully get some warmth, a coat for his back, and on a good night, maybe some sleep and a meal to eat. Valerie Amos, the UN's Undersecretary General for Humanitarian Affairs, spoke today, as well as Navi Pillay, who's a High Commissioner for Humanitarian.
She came here from Geneva. Navi came here.
Yeah, they both briefed the Security Council today, Friday. And as you can imagine, the news wasn't good. Amos says that the plea is now $1.5 billion. 1.5. And she's told me in the past that she's gotten. There's only one phone call that she really needs to make in order to contact the Syrian government to be able to access Syrian government-controlled areas. Accessing opposition-controlled areas is a whole different ballgame because there's different factions, different people to talk to, and you know they may be communicating well or not so well. So the safety is definitely an issue for humanitarian responders there. Jordan, how many refugees were they ever going to really be able to take? You know, a friend of mine who's a journalist in the press corps here pointed out that the amount of refugees pouring into Lebanon, you know, all of these countries, even Turkey.
A very stable country, Lebanon, right?
Yeah.
Refugees are going to help a whole lot there.
But when you pour 100, 200,000 people into any given country, especially if it's a smaller country, what you're doing is really shifting not necessarily adversely, but probably adversely affecting services in that country and the way that country deals with its everyday business. You can't just pour 200,000 people into a country like Jordan and expect business to remain the same every single day. All of a sudden there's a massive, huge group of people there. How could they take, I'm surprised that they took this many, to be honest with you. There are millions displaced in Syria. The problem only gets worse.
The problem seems to me gets worse as we have winter. They don't have the resources. And you can understand why Ban Ki-moon gets almost no response to his calls for nonviolent solutions to be imposed in Syria, the bloodshed to stop. That's politics. But why can't the UN raise money, the $1.5 billion, to take care of the refugees? It's not like there aren't a few countries that make a lot of money in that area of the world on natural resources.
But that's the point, is making money. Giving money isn't profitable. You can call it partial if you like to because of the source, but Bashar Jafari, the Syrian ambassador, who's obviously an employee of the Assad government, pointed out at some point a couple of months ago that many of these countries who continue to state the Syrian people, the Syrian people, the Syrian people, justice for the Syrian people, safety for the Syrian people as their reason for pumping guns, money into opposition forces in Syria, he says they're being disingenuous because you can measure their concern for the care of the Syrian people by their contributions to this fund. And where the money is there for Syrian opposition fighters, where the weapons are pouring in through Lebanon, through Libya, the money for food, for blankets, for coats, for medicine, that's not coming in nearly as quickly. The U.S. is quick to give $10, $15, $20 million to quote-unquote non-lethal aid, and this is the aid that they're talking about. But again, I couldn't tell you right offhand what the U.S. contributions to humanitarian aid in Syria are. There have been some. But when you're talking about $1.5 billion being needed, that's a lot of money by anybody's standards. And when you're also pouring money, I mean, think about it. This isn't the only humanitarian plea. The Sahel has a big plea out. Somalia's plea has never been filled. Oh, it's massive. I mean, there are gaping holes all over the world sucking in money because there are these big pools of humanitarian misery in the world. The world's not in great shape right now, particularly in this area, and those people need money. They need food, but more than that, what they need is a little bit of love and a little bit of patience so that they can learn to begin to build systems by which they can sustain themselves. Look at Somalia. There's no infrastructure. Give them a bag of rice and a blanket, and tomorrow the blanket will still be there and the rice will be eaten, and they'll still be in a country that's in chaos. And that's one example. This part of the world is in some trouble. And to ask why there's not enough money for them all is because the need is massive.
Well, of course, for a while, for let's say the last 6 weeks, things looked like, at least in Somalia, they weren't getting worse. And then we had the French raid, and it doesn't take much when you're 21 years without a government, destabilized population, Al-Shabaab moving around like whack-a-mole. You move them out of Mogadishu, they go somewhere else.
People are animals, and they have emotions and they have needs. You and I will not finish today, more than likely. I'll speak for myself. I will eat again today.
I hope I eat today too.
But that's the thing. Many people in Somalia won't. They're wondering where that next meal is going to come from. Doesn't matter who. If a group of guys with guns comes riding up to me on a truck and hands me a piece of cornbread and a bag of rice for my family and maybe a little container of cooking oil, I'm going to listen to what they have to say. And that's the bottom line. People need to take care of their needs. They need to look after their families. They need to look after themselves. And whoever's first in line with a solution to that is going to have some support, whether the West likes it or not.
Final question, Hank. We're on the eve of inauguration of a President of the United States this Monday, Martin Luther King Day. When you look out at the world, what do you think he should be most worried about?
There's a long list of things. Anti-Americanism in the Middle East is growing, and I think it's got something to do with existing policies that predated his administration. But drone attacks by the president have only escalated since the Bush years. Obama has really hit fifth gear with the drone attacks. And not only that, whatever judicial process, and they claim that there is one, but they won't let any sunlight get to it. It's a secret judicial process for which they are trying and apparently convicting, in some cases, American citizens for hits with these drone attacks. They're hitting Taliban every other week, it seems. Some weeks they hit them a couple of times. This is one problem. The Obama administration, another gaping problem with the Obama administration. There's a campaign promise about closing Guantanamo. No sign of that happening. And that's something that he doesn't really talk much about. But the biggest problem, at least domestically for the U.S., that the Obama administration has to face has everything to do with zero, and I mean zero, accountability on the world financial crisis. No indictments. Nobody's gone to jail. There's been no court proceedings. A couple of senatorial congressional hearings. Over the past couple of months, HSBC, the Royal Bank of Scotland, all of them, a group of banks here in the U.S. have settled on different things. One of them was playing with worldwide interest rates. Another one was found to be laundering money for cocaine dealers and terrorists. And then there was a group of banks here in the U.S. that settled about a week ago on massive repossession of homes and on mortgage charges, something like a $10 billion settlement. But all of these monies, all of these fines that'll be paid to the federal government come out of the banks themselves. They don't come out of the pockets of the bankers. They don't come out of the pockets of the doers, and these men will receive the same salaries and the same bonuses that they always did. So what lessons were learned? To my mind, none. Will the problem repeat itself? I think it's only a matter of time. Yeah. And this is something the president has not addressed, and it's something that if you're looking into and you're educated, it causes me a significant amount of worry. I worry for, I'm an American and a proud American. I'm a veteran. I would like to see the country manage a lot better than this.
Well, and for foreign policy, of course, if you believe that the U.S. is at least making progress to getting out of the last 5 years of recession, it's not so clear, according to the leader of the World Monetary Fund, that Europe is.
Right.
And, you know, there's nothing like to take your mind off a little domestic economic worry to have a little war. And our European friends may be cheering for wars. We've
got systems for that. We're always ready to roll in the U.S. You know, where will be the next one? Who knows? I mean, I hope there won't be another one. But there's one thing I'll give Obama for in a very pragmatic way. There's one feather that I'll give him, is that he has not begun any massive conventional wars. Has he been to war? Absolutely. He went to war under the guise of NATO on Libya, the overthrow of Muammar Gaddafi. You know, you can call Gaddafi whatever you want. I don't think anyone will call him an angel, but that was not a U.S. operation. It might have been mostly U.S. planes flying over, but it was under the guise of NATO. The drone things, these are strikes. Obama has not sent the 1st Infantry Division overseas in massive trillion-dollar campaigns to sweep across nations the way the Bush administration did. If you're going to be dominating the world and having your fingers in every pie the way the U.S. chooses to, I would rather it be, and again, this is very pragmatic, I'd rather we not be involved in everyone. I'd rather we be more like Switzerland, just get involved in ourselves and take care of our own affairs, you know, and improve the health of this country. But as long as we've got to be the world's police, I'd rather it be done inexpensively, strategically, with a high level of intelligence, instead of with massive conventional sweeps.
And to bring it back to where we began, it looks like we're using our planes to help the French go into Mali, and who knows what we're doing behind the scenes with Algeria. But it seems that the Algerians, if they have a model in the world for how they're going to solve this crisis, it's less America SEAL Team 6, more Putin, Beslan, or Grozny, go in, kill as many terrorists, bad guys as you can. That goes against the grain of our American approach.
Never forget that in the U.S., the revolving door between private industry corporations and the government is always in motion. There's always a back and forth. And so these American planes flying into Algeria or wherever else, they'll be protecting American corporate interests the way they always have. Big interests, energy interests.
And Boeing interests.
Sure.
Boeing interests. Hank Flynn, senior correspondent at the UN for Press TV, thank you for joining us today for Heat in the Middle East again. We'll look forward to you being back with us on Heat in the Middle East soon on iCastNews, live and direct from the United Nations in New York City. For Heat in the Middle East and iCastNews, I'm Jonathan Sanders.